All right, here we are on Martin Luther King Day, Monday, January 16th. I'm Patrick Cody, and I'm joined once again by the new state representative for Windsor 5 District, Woodstock, Plymouth, and Reading, Tesha Buss. Tesha, thank you for joining us once again and making time for this on the holiday.
Thank you for having me.
Great. So last week we talked to you about the first week, which I know was kind of a whirlwind with the opening of the session and getting your committee assignment and the inaugural address, and just I'm sure it was pretty much a whirlwind. Now you've got a little over a week under your belt there in the State House. I wanted to hear how things were going.
Oh, I've got it all down.
Yeah,
No,
that's good to hear.
That's right. It is an extremely exciting process. Most days are filled with meetings from the start of the day to the end of the day, whether it is in my own committee, which is where the large bulk of our work happens as legislators. But we also go to the floor so that we can hear all the bills that are introduced. So each day we show up, there are around, 10, 12 bills that they read the first line. We can see the bill itself, and then that bill is immediately referred to the committee for the committee to work on. So right now it's just a quick skim of everything that might be coming down the pike later on for us to vote on. Then we also have our caucuses. So I'm a member of the Rural Caucus and the Climate Caucus, as well as the Women's Caucus. And those meetings, the Rural Caucus and Climate Caucus, are far more about many different types of overreaching issues. The Women's Caucus is a bit more, this week we heard about from the Department of Corrections and buildings for the governor's office, and those collaborations on how we need to invest in our prison system in Vermont. So then we also this week had briefings from state agencies as well. So those will continue in the late afternoon. So it's a jam-packed day starting at 8 a.m. and typically not ending until 6. And then you have to go home and do all of your work for the next day.
And how's that adjustment been for you?
It's a little intense. Some of it is just simple systematic things, such as the iPad wasn't working for me. I would want to attach something to a constituent and it was on my computer, so I'd have to email it to my iPad so I could get it out. So I went to our wonderful technical team and was able to switch everything over to my computer. So my functionality is a little better. Also figuring out when you have to be somewhere and when you feel that you can get a briefing. So it is okay to divide and conquer. So I'm learning amongst friends. So now sometimes at the end of the week, we said, okay, next week, you'll go to climate, I'll go to rural, we'll share notes, and that will help us manage our time a bit better.
You said one thing. I just want to get back to when you said you're part of those three caucuses, there's the Rural Caucus, Women's Caucus, and the Climate Caucus?
Yes.
Okay. And so with the Rural Caucus, is that the same as the Economic Development Working Group?
It is not.
Okay.
The Rural Caucus meets from 8 to 9 once a week, and it is a bunch of legislators, and then they do invite speakers and other advocacy groups that are promoting things that could be of benefit to the Rural Caucus for us to learn about. And they could also be folks that are advocating for legislation to encourage economic impacts in rural Vermont. So, for instance, there's a housing bill that's coming through that would help rural communities also deal with designation areas downtown, reduce some of the restrictions around getting water and sewer hooked up to accessory dwelling units, or units where there's one house that might turn into a duplex or a triplex. So right now you have to get that permit with the state and a permit with the town for those interconnections. And this would relax those restrictions so that you only had to do it with one agency instead of two, because you're just doubling work for the same purpose. So things like that are being worked on, which I think will be great to help with rural Vermont.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah. I just wasn't sure. Do you know anything about, is that working, the Economic Development Working Group, is that still, are they still meeting? Or
Well,
is
there
that
is a
just for the
working group
last
here in
biennium?
Woodstock that's
Mhm.
continuing.
Right. Yeah. There's a legislative one. I know that was in the last biennium, and I didn't know if there was some synergy between, if that was continuing, or if there's some synergy between your caucus and that. But
I haven't read any emails
mhm.
with a specific invitation with that name, but I will also say there have been some consolidation because tourism used to be its own caucus. And they've decided to put that in the rural caucus because a lot of tourism happens in our rural communities
Right.
more so than in Burlington.
Mhm. Um, Speaking of emails, I mean, so far, I know it's only been a little over a week, but are you getting flooded with emails from constituents? Or you get feeling phone calls? I mean, how's it been so far with just interacting with the general constituency?
There have been quite a few folks that have written to me. Some folks are using my personal email because I've known them for such a long time. Other folks are reaching out through my legislative email, and I've been able to get back to most people, but today is still a catch-up day for me as well. Um, some of it is that I need to learn before I can respond. Hopefully, in several months or maybe several weeks, hopefully. And it depends upon how close the issue is to the committee that I'm working on. If you email me tomorrow about the education committee, I'm going to be far more in the know than if you email me something about fish and wildlife, where I have to go track down who has that information.
Um, and you would like prefer for people to use the legislative email, I'm sure, to help keep things organized, or
Yes,
and we'll
and
put
it
that on
keeps
the we'll flash
me.
that on the bottom of the screen
Yes,
there.
yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So tell me about the what are you working on right off the bat with the House Education Committee? I know that was your committee assignment. So what's going on there?
Well, this week it started with education finance, and we had three different state economists that focus on education finance, and they punted to each other to explain to us all the individual components. And the first day, I felt more confused about it than I did before the meeting. But then the second day, this amazing man named Brad James came to speak to us. And he's one of the few people that truly understands and speaks in sort of like real language regarding all of the components. And so that made a lot more sense to me, that we essentially, our school says we need this much money for our expenses. And then the state says, okay, we're going to send you meals and rooms money, sales tax money, and homestead and non-homestead property tax money. And that's going to determine your property tax rate. In essence, that's a very, very basic form. So we learned a bit more about that. One of the things that's coming down the pike for us is to learn more and study income-based education financing to see if that is a manner of funding education that might be more equitable. And until I learn, I don't know, and I don't have anything to report yet, except
Mhm.
for that will happen, and I will report when that does.
And I know Meals on Wheels is pretty near and dear to your heart.
Meals on Wheels is near and dear to my heart. I grew up in the restaurant industry and actually cooked Meals on Wheels back in high school. And it is very, very important. There are many, many food programs out in the state of Vermont that help folks that with qualifying incomes. The concern I have for seniors is that those food programs, it's raw food. So when you have a senior that is really struggling to walk and really care for themselves, and then they have to then focus on meals, on cooking the Meals on Wheel program is just so important. There are so many seniors that subsist on, some simple hard-boiled eggs for breakfast, then the lunch is their main meal, and cheese and crackers is their dinner. This is important. And the state, there's federal money that comes through to aid the Meals on Wheels program. And there's a bill coming through this year that would add $2 per meal to help the Meals on Wheels program. So we'll see when that gets through committee what that ends up looking like at the end of it. But I am a huge proponent of the Meals on Wheels program.
And I also wanted to touch on, or I guess you wanted to touch on the government operations committee and what they were working on in terms of the use of technology. And can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes. Well, one thing that COVID did bring into our lives more is technology. And one of the things that I think a lot of towns have recognized is that with the ability to join meetings virtually, we have a higher attendance rate. I can be home as a single mom and join the meeting, but I can't necessarily find childcare so that I could go join the town hall meeting live and in person. And I think this is really important to our overall democracy. There are, again, the same folks that are receiving Meals on Wheels. If you're 102, you may not be able to get to the town hall at 7 p.m. So that is certainly what government operations is looking at, to have this be able to continue, because I think the overall thought is that it does help our democracy and it does promote greater attendance. And with more voices, we will represent more viewpoints. That's important.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I know a lot of towns have been using a hybrid meeting format over the last year or more, where it's like part in person and part remote. And the State House, all of your committee meetings are live streamed and recorded and available on YouTube, and then available for stations like ours to pick up too and share with the community at large. So there is a lot. But just speaking from my own experience, there's a lot of the technology is great when you have it, and it's all working together, but getting the technology working all of the time is a real challenge. You need to have a good team of people who's just focused on that to make it work, so that it is accessible and it is meeting its goal.
Agreed. And I'm hoping that what we could do is, even if a person can't stay for the whole meeting, if there could be someone that goes to set up the equipment and then just do a quick training on how to turn it off, that would be really amazing. That person wouldn't have to stay for the whole meeting. But I think that, yes, we're going to need some further assistance in order to make this work for a lot of towns.
Well, it sounds like we'll be talking to you again soon, and it does sound like we'll be joined by the Vermont Standard's Tom Ayers, who will be taking over my role, so I can focus on things behind the scenes. But I'll still be there with you, and I appreciate you making the time to do this, because I do think it's great for to engage the sort of community and inform them on what you're doing, and also just hear from you your reflections of a first-time legislator going through the process and of legislating. So it's educational for all of us.
Excellent. Well, good. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for doing the good work that you do, and I really look forward to continued meetings like this, and it'll be exciting to have Tom Ayers in collaboration.